Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The US and Israel have attacked Iran for a third day. Israel is expanding operations to include Hezbollah in Lebanon, while Iran has targeted US military facilities across the Gulf region. As the conflict escalates, US President Donald Trump said the air campaign could last 4 to 5 weeks. So how long might this war continue? What is Washington's strategy once the bombing stops? And how will war reshape Iran and the entire Middle East region? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, joining me today are Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Center for Sustainable Development, Columbia University, Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi at the University of Tehran, Huang Jing, University Professor at Shanghai International Studies University, and Dr. Sara Yael Hirschhorn later on also will be she's a visiting professor at the University of Haifa. Welcome to the show. So Professor Marandi, let's start with you. I know you, just before the show, you shared with us, you heard explosions nearby. Share with us, how is the situation on the ground? What's the public sentiment, given what happened over the past 3 days, let's say? So it seems like we have a disconnection there. Obviously, Anna, we are seeing this escalation, entire region, basically one way or the other, got involved. And we are hearing that the European countries, major European countries, the US, UK, France, and Germany, they are talking about providing defense operation to Israel and the US. At the same time, Israel is attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. What do you make of the development there?
Well, it's puzzling. I mean, you're adding more gasoline onto a fire that's already out of control. Donald Trump lit a fuse a few days ago with the help of, or at the urging, I should say, of Israel. It is now turned into a full regional conflict and now going outside the region with European powers thinking that they're going to wage in. Germany, I'm not certain why they're doing it. They do not have any oil interests, although they do have substantial chemical interests. Obviously, Britain and France both have oil interests there, but it is, what are they going to do that is going to stem this? I would assume that they should be asking for negotiations to get this around a peace table to finish off something that is only going in one direction, and that is downwards.
Professor Huang Jing, the European countries' response to the war so far has been, I would say it's kind of awkward for them. On one hand, they try to criticize Iran, at the same time trying to ignore, the U.S. and Israeli action there. So Professor Huang, are you with us?
Sorry. Yes, but your voice is like interrupting. I can only hear part of it. It's about the leaders' reaction or response.
Yes.
That's what you are.
Yes.
Frankly, I think European leaders are in a very awkward position. They cannot go directly against the person that is President Donald Trump, who launched the war. I mean, it's really reckless. I don't know how to describe it. But on the other hand, they also feel being sandwiched between, they have a large, in their land, in their country, large number of Muslim citizens, Muslim.
It seems there's a tech glitch there with Professor Huang Jing. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, welcome to the show. You are in the U.S. I wonder, what's your view of the war? Previously the U.S. and Iran, they were at the negotiation table. The progress were reported between the two sides, but all of a sudden there was an attack by the U.S., by the Israelis. What do you make of this, the negotiation previously?
This is, of course, a repeat of 2025. The United States was negotiating last year, and then in the middle of the negotiations attacked. These negotiations are a fake. They are a cover for war. This war was planned weeks ago. The negotiations were basically a cover story unless Iran suddenly capitulated to every U.S. demand. The plan was to go to war. The American people are strongly against this war. This is a war of the CIA and Mossad, and Trump is their instrument of management and politics. But the American people are very, very much against this war. And it's done on treacherous grounds. It is not about negotiation. The negotiations actually with Iran succeeded 10 years ago in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It was Donald Trump, under the urging of the CIA and Mossad, to rip it up, which they did. So this has never really been about negotiation. This is about power. This is about Israel's dominance in the Middle East, and it's about America's attempt at global dominance.
All right, Professor, President Trump talked about, destroying Iran missiles, infrastructure, nuclear facility. And of course, he also talked about, calling for the Iranians, the public, to rise up against the government. What does he exactly want out of Iran?
He wants a vassal state in Iran, the same way as Europe is a vassal region of the United States. Why does Europe not speak out against the United States? Because Europe is militarily occupied by the United States. There are U.S. military bases and CIA headquarters or posts all over Europe. And the United States once had that in Iran under the police state of the Shah of Iran, and the United States wants to return to occupying Iran. That's the goal. I don't think the goal will be successful.
Some people say, that Trump basically is calling for a regime change in Iran. If you look at the history, the past practice, like in Libya, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, do you expect there will be, they can achieve such a goal?
The United States is looking back to its success in Iran in 1953. Then they overthrew the Iranian government and installed a police state that lasted from 1953 to 1979. So they're trying to repeat that. But these are different times. And the United States is very unlikely to be able to achieve this. What you say about Libya, Sudan, Syria, Iraq is more to the point, which is that all of those operations by the United States to install puppet regimes failed.
So before you go, Professor, what do you make of the latest development? Do you see Israel is expanding the operation to include attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon? And of course, the Iranians, is retaliating against the U.S. by attacking their military facilities in the Gulf region. And the major European countries are, basically poised to join the war. So we are seeing escalating war beyond Iran and Israel, U.S., to expand it into the region and also probably beyond the region now.
I think Europe has nothing to offer. They have depleted their military capacity in Ukraine long ago, so their joining the war does not change anything. There's a basic military question. Does Iran have more missiles and missile defense than the U.S. and Israel? The answer is probably yes, actually. Because the U.S. has perhaps a few weeks of munitions and anti-missile defenses in the region. Israel's stockpile is very limited. And Iran, if it keeps going for a few weeks, I think will have a kind of dominance in a war of attrition of missiles and anti-missile defenses. So I don't see militarily the U.S. And Israeli situation as being very strong.
Thank you, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Now let's turn to Professor Marandi in Tehran. Professor, you talked about hearing explosions nearby.
Thank you. Could I listen just for one moment?
Yeah, go ahead. Professor Marandi, so what's the situation is like in Tehran where you live, and what's the public sentiment to what happened over the past couple of days?
Well, first I'd like to greet Professor Sachs and applaud him for all the great work that he does. The last 2 days have been very painful for ordinary people. The city of Tehran, along with other cities, have been bombed repeatedly. Hospitals have been bombed. The Gandhi hospital, ironically, in Tehran, which is a private hospital, was struck and they had to evacuate it. And the IVF department was also, some say, destroyed. I don't know. So that would be a great tragedy. But we know that literally at the start of the attack, the Americans, they bombed an elementary school in Minob city, a very small city. I've never been there before myself, but they killed roughly 170 girls at the elementary school and their teachers, 170, 180, I don't know the precise number. And imagine what that's like for a small city, a small town, to lose all their little kids, all their little girls. It's just beyond belief. We've seen in my neighborhood, they bombed areas, residential areas. And pretty soon, I'm assuming the Israeli and the American regimes will do what they do in Lebanon and in Gaza. They'll start saying that underneath hospitals and underneath schools, their bases, to justify death and destruction across the board. But what we have seen is the Iranians rallying together after the murder of Ayatollah Khamenei, which was, of course, at the beginning of the unprovoked war, and this is the second unprovoked war in 8-9 months. We saw people come to the streets in huge numbers. On my Telegram channel, as well as on my Twitter account, I posted last night images from across Tehran last night. They had rallies across the city, tens of rallies. Each had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And they were on the streets commemorating his martyrdom, his murder by the Americans. And they were being bombed. The city was being bombed as they were commemorating on the streets, but people would not leave. Mm-hmm. They said that they're prepared for death. And this is basically where things stand. The United States has united the Iranian people more than ever before. The Israeli regime, of course, they've done the same because they're in it together.
Okay. So
basically because it's an unprovoked war, and because they target civilians, and because they murdered the leader, Ayatollah Khamenei.
Right, more solidarity there. Then what about the government? We know that after the killing of the leadership, including the supreme leader there, is the government functioning as normal?
Yes, we have a constitution, and that constitution provides the way forward. There's a 3-person council that leads the country until the Guardian Council chooses a new leader. So things are functioning as you see from the news. Literally an hour after the attack on Iran began, the Iranians began striking back, and they've been striking back hard for the last 2 days. And the government is functioning. You drive around Tehran, many shops are open. Many people have also left because after they bombed the school, the government decided to shut down all schools and universities. And they encourage people who don't need to be in the cities to leave, especially the city of Tehran. So there is much less traffic than usual, but some shops are open. Government is functioning. The armed forces, of course, is actively working to defend the country.
Yes. So Anna, right now we see reports of U.S. soldiers being killed and also some others seriously injured, and also in Kuwait, the defense ministry reporting that the falling of the U.S. Crashing of the U.S. Aircrafts there. Of course, on the Iranian side, there were killing of hundreds of people there. So, I mean, what will be the effect, especially will that kind of creating the pressure on Trump administration because of the loss of lives, not only on the other side but also on their own side?
Well, it's pretty clear that Trump thought he was going to have a very easy time of it, that this would be like Venezuela. He'd waltz in, waltz out with a victory and use that to go into the midterm elections, deflect attention from the Epstein files and his own economic failed policies. That hasn't happened. The last thing he wanted was body bags coming back to the United States. Now he's in a very difficult position. He doesn't know how to unwind what he started. It has now become regional. The Saudis have indicated they're very angry at him because the U.S. has failed to protect them, even though they allow bases there. Obviously, Iran is feeling that anybody who is siding with the U.S., including having a base, is responsible. U.S. bases used to be a shield. Now they have become a target. And as a result, you're seeing around the world a complete rethink across the global south, not only about how reliable the United States is, but protecting themselves. And this could cause a nuclear, not war, but a nuclear showdown where every single country is trying to find nuclear weapons. We see it as the only alternative to an arbitrary unipolar power.
The worsening of international security for sure there. Professor Marandi, if you look at the situation right now, both sides suffered, not only the Iranians, but also the U.S. side and also U.S. military facilities in the region. But, of course, Iran is facing a much more powerful enemy here, the U.S., Israel. What's the strategy of the Iranian side? I mean, probably the war will go on for some time.
Well, this is a war of choice for the United States. There was no need for conflict, and there were negotiations taking place just like the previous time where they allowed the Israeli regime to launch a 12-day war. So for the United States, while it's a war of choice, though, for Iran, it is a war of survival. We have no option but to fight, and to fight as hard as possible, because this is a rogue regime. These are rogue regimes that represent the Epstein class, and they're brutal. They do not recognize international law. They do not recognize any boundaries, as your previous guest rightly said. The world is rethinking their security strategy, countries across the world. Right now, they're strangling Cuba. They've taken the people of Venezuela hostage, and who knows what they'll do tomorrow. So Iran has no option but to fight, and it will fight back hard. And we're already seeing that play out in the Persian Gulf, on the other side of the Persian Gulf, where these Arab regimes are hosting U.S. bases, allowing those bases to work against Iran. And so far, the Iranian counterstrikes have been very effective. They've been striking the Israeli regime. They've been striking U.S. bases across the board. Hopefully, pressure from inside the United States, as the cost of this war goes up, direct costs and indirect, the price of energy is going through the roof. Iran doesn't want any of this. Iran wants the global economy to function normally. But the United States is pushing us towards a situation where we may have a global economic meltdown. Price of oil is already going up. And of course, the cost of the U.S. military presence in the region and the attacks is also enormous for the United States. Of course, we are being hurt too, and they're striking day and night. And as I said, I heard explosions right before the show. One was pretty close by. But we have no option. We did not start the war. And we know that if we seek a solution, the Trump regime will betray us. They've already, when we were negotiating, they attacked us. And last time around, when we were negotiating, they attacked us. So our only option is to fight back until we impose a strategic defeat on the Trump regime and the Netanyahu regime.
Professor, what about this? Trump talked about, basically he called for the Iranian military forces to lay down the arms, and he talked about the Venezuela model, working with someone from Tehran, and then he can operate this military strike, in a quick manner, can finish it in a quick manner. How likely is that to happen?
And that will never happen. And the problem for the West is that they believe their own propaganda. They say Iran is about to implode. It's a house of cards. The regime, as they like to call it, is unpopular. Well, we've seen how the people come to the streets, and we've seen them defend the state. They've been saying this propaganda for 47 years. If you look at the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other media outlets in the 1990s, and compare them to what they're saying today, it's almost identical. Back then, they were saying Iran is about to collapse. The youth hate the revolution. There's a counter-revolution brewing. Now, it's no different from now. They're constantly saying the same thing. And therefore, their policies are devised based on a lack of understanding. And they always hit a brick wall. So today we're seeing that for 48 hours, Iran, they murdered the leader, and they're bombing the country day and night. And the only thing that we're seeing from the people is that they're coming to the streets under aerial bombardment to defend the Islamic Republic of Iran. So Trump will fail, although it will come at a heavy cost to everyone. The world. But the Americans are delusional. And during the 12-day war, if you recall, he said the same thing. He posted a Truth Social post telling the Iranians unconditional surrender. Well, then after 8 or 9 days, we saw that it was Netanyahu who was begging for a ceasefire. This is something that Steve Bannon said twice on his show, and he, of course, is an insider of sorts. The Israelis sought a ceasefire, not Iran. So nothing that the United States says, and nothing that Western media says, because Western media is controlled by the oligarchy. It's controlled by the Epstein class. So people shouldn't take anything that Trump says very seriously, or anything that the Western media says very seriously.
Right. Now we have Sara in Israel, I believe in Haifa, joining us. Hello, Sara. You hear me okay?
How are you?
Yeah, share with us what's the situation like where you live.
I live in Jerusalem. Things have been very unpredictable. I've probably been to the shelter 15 times or more in the past 24 hours. As you know, I was on your program yesterday and I had to leave in the middle because the siren went off. So we are trying to understand how much longer this may go on.
What's the expectation of your friends, neighbors? Do people? I bet people have guesses like how long this will continue, and what will be the resolution? Whether when peace will come back.
Well, we're following reports in the media that the Trump administration apparently has sought several different off-ramps from military exercises. It was reported yesterday that the Iranian regime, and I do use the word the Iranian regime to separate it from the Islamic Republic from the people, unlike our previous guests, had asked to have some negotiations with the Trump administration, and they agreed, but obviously we have no idea what has taken place there. It seems that both the United States and Israel are continuing to hit military and intelligence targets as we speak. So even if there are negotiations going on, clearly Iran is still being pummeled by military force, and we are being, reciprocated here. So we really don't know. There's a lot of, it really depends on whether the United States is going to try to continue to enforce a policy of regime change, or whether they're willing to look at a more limited understanding of a regime shuffle.
Right. Sara, the latest reports had that, Israel is also attacking Hezbollah, kind of expanding the war to Lebanon. What's the consideration?
I would correct you that Hezbollah launched a unilateral attack on Israel early last night. So I'm not sure that the latest rockets have come from Hezbollah, not from the other side. But Israel has responded, yes.
Mm-hmm. Anna, if you look at the whole situation, we are seeing escalating tensions, obviously, because more and more parties are got involved here. Yes. And I know this notice that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, had a phone conversation with his Russian counterpart, Lavrov, about, the situation. They're talking about, what he calling for is like immediate ceasefire, return to dialogue, negotiation, opposition to unilateral action there. I guess also, if you look at an online opinion poll by CGTN, majority of the respondents, like more than 90%, they don't like this military operation led by U.S. And people, obviously, I think this is the goal is, people are concerned with the security. People are looking forward to like a peace and security prevail as soon as possible.
Well, that's what people want, but I don't know that that's what they're going to get. This is now shaping up to be a much longer war. We've heard first that there was going to 4-day first phase. Nothing was said after that. Now you have Donald Trump saying 4 to 5 weeks. 4 to 5 weeks. But the fact is, the deeper you get in, the more parties that are involved, the less likely are that you're going to have people sitting around the peace table. And the other problem with that is that the attack was from the U.S. With Israel at a time when they were sitting down at the negotiating table. As you heard earlier by Jeffrey Sachs, this is the second time that they've used negotiations as a subterfuge to stage attacks. So how do you sit down with somebody you don't trust? This is what I think China and Russia are trying to figure out, how to create a peace table that is not surrounded just by the parties, but by others who have good intentions. Remember, this is going to be a catastrophic event. I mean, if you go back to 1973, when the oil embargo happened, that was 7% of the world's oil. That resulted in a quadrupling of prices. Mm-hmm. The first Iranian revolution in '79 resulted in 2x prices. The Russian and Ukrainian war resulted in doubling. This is 20%. The Russian-Ukrainian war was less than 5%. So you multiply that by 4. We're talking about major recession. We're talking about people who are going to be tossed out of their homes because they cannot pay their bills for their cars, for energy, because this impacts every single part of how people live today. It all requires energy. So this is a pretty nasty scenario. This is what Marandi was talking about in terms of the only card that the Iranians think that they have to push real damage onto the U.S., but it's going to cost the rest of the world. Then you hear from the Israeli side that they're worried about flip-flopping on this regime change, as if the regime change is even possible. These people are at home. The Iranians are in their homes. How do you change the people who are in their homes? They're actually rallying around, for many of them, a very unpopular government. So things are going from bad to worse.
Right, and everybody in the world will be affected one way or the other with oil prices and, of course, the insecurity ongoing there. Well, with that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qingduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.